Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann McAvoy, and I'm here at the Circle Center in Myrtle Beach to tell my Baba story, how I came to Meher Baba. And I have to start way back in the early days. This isn't going to be a biography, but so much of my life is involved with God in one way or another. So, my mother divorced my Irish Catholic dad when I was 3. And that was the end of my being a Catholic. She remarried, and I became a Protestant. Now that's very important, and you'll see as we go along. As a Protestant, I went to Sunday school, and I loved it. My mother says I used to have temper tantrums if I couldn't go. I loved Jesus, and I don't know that I loved God because that's such a nebulous concept, but I was very much in love with Jesus. And this went on for 3 years or so, till I was 6. And when I was 6, I was raped by friends of the family over a period of several months. And my mother found out about it. Now I have to tell you about my mother. My mother was first generation Swedish. She came from a Swedish Baptist family. They make Southern Baptists look ultra-liberal. Okay? My mother found out about this. I have no idea how. But she took me for a ride. And she said I was going to hell.
No?
God would never forgive me, and there was nothing I could do about it. That set the stage for my life, at least until I came to Baba. That was the predominant theme in my life, God rejecting me. What I did in response to that, I'm sure at 6 I wasn't consciously doing this, but I put on a tough guy persona to protect this horrible hole in my heart. I mean, God, Jesus, I loved so much. And he was sending me to hell, and there was nothing I could do about it.
Mm.
And so I tried to kill God in any way I could. Now, how does one kill God? I don't know. I just was rough and tough. But you know, I was a seeker. I had all these questions. And perhaps that exacerbated the questions. Why am I here? Why did God make people? What's the purpose of life? And these questions kept going on and on in my mind. In fact, when I was a teenager, I used to go into New York City from New Jersey. And I remember writing really angry poems to God about you sitting on your golden throne, pulling the strings on all us puppets. Which ain't so far from wrong, in a way. But the anger was there, and I guess I could say most of my life before I came to Baba was a time of anger. A time of not trusting anyone, not trusting the world. It was just not a nice place to be. In my early teens, when I was old enough, I turned off on church. I stopped going as soon as I could get my parents to stop forcing me to go. And probably because of my tough guy exterior, my parents found me a very difficult child. And I found them, or at least my stepfather, awful. We did not get along at all. And it was until I was preparing this, I had thought that my parents had just labeled me as a bad person from the time I was raped. But I realized in preparing this talk that my inadvertently adapting a tough guy stance made a lot of difficulty for between my parents and I. Especially my stepfather, who adopted my mom because he wanted 2 little girls. And here's this very not nice little girl. I don't mean I was bad, but I was just... Anyway, I was looking for answers all this time. And in high school, I found Lao Tzu and read him and thought, wow, there is some light in this dark world. But that's all I could find. And so I could find nothing else that gave me solace in Trenton, New Jersey in the early 1950s. Well, because my parents and I didn't get along very well, I had to work my way through college. They sent my sister to a fancy finishing school, but not me. So first I went to a junior college because it was cheap, and that's the story that Bob must have been working with me then. I didn't have any money, and I went to this junior college in downtown Trenton. I went into the office and I said, I want to come to your school and I don't have any money, but I'm honest, and I've got I'll have several jobs and I'll pay you whatever I get every day. And they let me do it. And I had an average of between 3 and 5 jobs all the time I was going through junior college. I even had one job where I got paid for sleeping. There was a woman who was pregnant and she had a young daughter. And the child would wake up in the night and the mom was having a tough time with the pregnancy. So they gave me $3 a night for sleeping there. I mean, I just lucked out. Okay, while I was in junior college, I also became what is known as a church tramp. That's not my invention. Somebody called me that later on, and I thought, oh, okay. I went to all the various churches looking for answers. I couldn't find any. But I looked, and I kept searching, and finally I gave up. I said, no, that's not working. And I'm reading about Margaret Krask. She had done the same thing. She had searched very much for answers all over. And then she gave up on her search. And it was when she gave up that Baba sent a telegram to East Chalicum saying, love calls me west. And when he met Margaret that first night he was in London, he said, it was your love that brought me. Anyway, got through with junior college, and my real dad, my alcoholic dad, gave me money for my 3rd year of college. And I went to a college in Tennessee. It was a church college, a Presbyterian college. And I went because I really missed the love I had for Christ as a little child. And I wanted to get it back. So I thought, well, maybe a church college will do it. Well, I hated that college. And that college hated me. They had rules that you wouldn't believe. Women couldn't wear red because it was an exciting color. We couldn't wear patent leather shoes because guys would look up our dresses. We couldn't stand still and talk to a guy. We had to be walking. They had dances every night after dinner, but you had to be 3 feet apart, and they had a yardstick and they measured. I got put on probation because I broke one of their rules, which is you can't ride in a car. And I had an interview at University of Tennessee because I was going to transfer out of this school. I hated it. And I wanted to finish up, and UT accepted me. But I rode in a car to get there. And I could account for every bit of my time, but they kicked me out. But they didn't kick me out while I was there. That summer, after my 1 year at college in Maryville, it was Maryville College in Tennessee, I went to Boston College to get a year of German. And I lived with my dad and my real dad and his wife. And partway through my year of German in the summer, I got a letter from Maryville College saying I was kicked out and I could not be readmitted for at least 10 years, and they had it stamped on my transcript. So, Maryville, or University of Tennessee, rescinded their acceptance of me because they were only 40, 50 miles away, and this person must have been awful if they couldn't be readmitted for at least 10 years. Well, that summer, when I finished summer school, my sister and I took a vacation and we went to Tennessee. And I went to the college and said, "Why did you expel me?" And they said that not a guard, that's my perception of them, the person who watched the campus saw a person cutting campus who had a ponytail and carried a shoulder purse, and it had to be me. Now, cutting campus meaning leaving campus without permission. We were allowed 2 town nights a week till 9 o'clock, and that was it. And apparently this person either left after 9 or I don't know. But for that, that's why they stamped on my transcript, not to be readmitted for 10 years. So, I got out of there, and after UT withdrew their acceptance, that led to me working full-time, doing a variety of things, and taking classes part-time at college. It took me another 3.5 years to be able to graduate. And I was only 1 semester shy when Maryville kicked me out. Oh, well. One of the jobs I did, I taught school in Robbinsville, New Jersey. And I taught special ed. I married my husband, a Jewish man, and that I met at Rutgers, and we moved to California, where we studied Buddhism and discovered Unitarianism. This is back in the mid to late 50s. And again, I began to see that there was more light. It wasn't just Lao Tzu that had some answers, something that made sense to me. As I read more and more esoteric literature that I was exposed to initially through the Unitarian Church and through my Buddhist contacts. Well, I left my first husband. He was far too nice for the persona I'd assumed. He really was. He was a delightful man, but I couldn't appreciate him. So I left him, and I finally graduated from Sacramento State after 7 years from when I began at Trenton Junior. After I graduated from Sac State, I got another teaching job in California, and I married my second husband, who happened to be the principal at the school I was teaching. And I taught special ed again there. And I was still going to school at night, going to graduate school. While I was married to Roy, we adopted 2 Eurasian children. And I continued going to the Unitarian Church and reading more about spirituality. And I continued teaching special ed, and then had a stint at regular junior high. I'd like to say that during this time I was getting softer and less angry, but I don't think in retrospect that was the case. I was attracted to a man, my second husband, who was abusive, not physically, but emotionally abusive. And after 7 years, I left him, and I moved to Portland, Oregon with the kids. That was the beginning of a wonderful time. Even though it was very difficult, I loved Portland. I was able to buy a log cabin in the woods with 4.5 acres. It was a wonderful place to raise my children. And went to the Unitarian church there that was really a quite offbeat church in the woods. And I got involved briefly with a Gurdjieff school outside of Portland, but it didn't feel right to me. So I pulled back. But I kept reading Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, and then I married again, a fellow Unitarian this time. This was another school principal. You'd think I would have learned the first time. That's what the superintendent of schools said when I let him know that I was married another principal. He said, "Are you crazy?" Anyway, we lived unhappily in my log cabin for a year, and I realized I'd made a mistake within a week of our really cool hippie marriage. But during that time, I got involved in TM, which helped. And I also had lots of counseling. There were organizations that would do counseling for free, like Lutheran Family Services, because I never had any money. I was broke almost all the time. Anyway, after I left him, the kids and I wound up briefly on welfare. This was an amazing experience. Perhaps the first time I sensed that God was with me. There was this buzz going on in my head. I don't know that I could hear it, but it was there. And what was that buzz was, hang in there. This will be a very valuable experience and it won't last long. But that probably kept me from going totally crazy. But I was raised in an upper middle class Republican home where people on welfare were no good bums. And I could not function while I was on welfare. I mean, I really couldn't function. I became mentally retarded. And I realized what it was like to be retarded. The only way I got out of it was that there was a program through welfare to help people who were on it. And they helped me get out of bed, because I couldn't get out of bed. They just helped me all along. And they put me in a WIN program, which was a program, it's called a work incentive program. And they said, if you have an interview, tell somebody. If they hire you, welfare will pay half your salary. So with that, I felt a little confident, went out and got a job. Never told them I was in the WIN program. And I began my sojourn through the world of private nonprofits. My first job was that I got right from welfare was administrative assistant to the YMCA Latchkey program. And then I graduated and I ran a Latchkey program. And then I was a trainer for the city of Portland and a program developer for migrant daycare. And then I ran the migrant daycare. And then I was an organizational trainer for the Diocese of Oregon and Washington. How I got that, I don't know. As a Unitarian who really didn't believe in much of anything. Must have been Baba helping me again. None of them paid much, but we got by. But by now, I was thoroughly entrenched in my spiritual quest. I got involved in a wonderful spiritual class in Oregon, led by a teacher named Ron Ramos, whom I'm sure you've never heard of, and that's okay. He was a wonderful auto mechanic who studied in the early days with Oscar Achaza, who started the Eureka School, if you've ever heard of it. It's an esoteric school, the Eureka Institute that Father, hold on, I love him and I keep spacing his name, Ed Flanagan also attended and was a teacher for them for a while. Ron may have been, I'm not sure. Anyway, that was my spiritual quest at the time. Ron was wonderful. He offered his students, instead of giving us a particular path to follow, he gave us a spiritual smorgasbord and let us choose. And he did mention Meher Baba, but he mentioned so many others. It's like that name went in one ear and out the other. Or so I think. Anyway, I stayed with Ron for a year. I guess it was during the second year when the group wanted a teacher from Atlanta to come and talk to our class. And Ron was open to that. So the group started bringing this guy from Atlanta to talk to our class every couple of weeks, and they paid. I didn't like him, so I didn't participate in that. But after a few months, the group decided they were all going to move to Atlanta and study with this teacher. And Ron said he was going to go too. Little did we know at the time that he never intended to. He got as far as San Francisco and worked with the, not the beatniks, the punk rockers. Anyway, as here I am in Oregon, all my spiritual buds are leaving the state, and I couldn't stand it. So I wrote a letter to this teacher in Atlanta and said, "Can I come too?" And he said yes. Now mind you, and at the time, this is backstory because I skipped something. The nonprofit jobs had seemingly dried up. So I spent my last 2 years in Oregon on unemployment. Picking up, if I could get a temporary job, I did, but they were few and far between. Then finally, I was offered this great job, Administrative Director of Oregon Fair Share, which is Oregon's version of United Way. But as the class and Ron had all decided they were going to Georgia, I turned down a job which would have been better paying than anything I'd ever had. But my spiritual quest was so important that it didn't matter that I was turning down a job after 2 years of unemployment. I mean, Baba had me hooked, although I wasn't aware of it, that this is what's happening. This is what's important in your life. Other things are just there. So, after turning down the job, I sold some of my stuff, packed what I could in the car, and my son and I moved to Atlanta, where I had another 2 years of unemployment, keeping body and soul together with temp jobs. And I studied with this teacher, and I hated every minute of it. I kept thinking, surely there's got to be something here. But there wasn't for me because I missed the heart. His way of teaching was sort of Gurdjieffian. I'd already tried that and didn't like it. I didn't feel any heart there. The only way I got through with any sanity for the year and a half I was with him was by reading Maurice Nicole's commentaries on dialogue on Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, because he's full of love. So I left that teacher after a year and a half. And shortly after I left, I was walking down the street, and I'm not visual, but I can almost picture this scene. Walking down the street with my friend Jerry Ann, who was also from Oregon. And some of you may have met her. She's done Sufi dancing here a couple times. She lives in Oregon, but she's come here to visit and has done some Sufi dancing. Anyway, we're walking down the street, and I had had a long-term temp job that just ended. And I said, Jerry Ann, I want to go on a spiritual retreat. I want to go to the coast, but I don't want to be on the beach. I want to be in the woods. And I don't want a motel. I want a little cabin. And I can't spend more than $50 for the week. And she said, oh, sounds like you want to go to the Baba Center. And I said, what's that? And she said, well, it sounds like it'll fit your description. I've never been there, but a friend of mine from Oregon has told me about it because she's been there. So I called the center and I talked to Jane Haynes. She asked me all about my spiritual background, and I went through this whole litany of all the things I'd read and the teachers I'd studied with and blah, 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 blah. And she said, fine, you can come, just write us a letter. And I said, I can't write you a letter. I need to come tomorrow. You don't understand. If I don't come tomorrow, if I wait till Monday, I'll have another job offer for a temp job, and I can't turn it down because I need the money. But I've saved enough for a short retreat. She said, okay, come ahead. So somehow I got to the center without my letter. And I came for a week, stayed in Cabin on the Hill in June, and I stayed for 16 days. I came for a week, stayed 16 days. Baba let me have Cabin on the Hill all by myself for the first week. And what did I do? The typical things people do. I went to the beach some. I made my first Baba friends, including Shirla and Jerry Edwards, who were there at the time. I listened to Baba stories galore, some from old timers who'd met Baba and still hung out at the center, like Virginia Rudd and her husband. And, you know, they were just folks hanging out, sharing their stories. And I valued all the stories I heard from folks, old and the new ones in the refectory. All the stories were different, which I'd never run into before. Before, when you talked to people about their experience, if they went to a church, they all had the same line. Wherever I went, I never heard the variety. Everyone was talking from their heart, and they had something special for them, meaningful for them. And I treasured the most loving care that I got from the staff, especially Jeff Wolverton. And I read. That has always been my favorite hobby. Well, the very first book Baba literally put in my hands, I don't remember choosing it. It's like God Speaks. And I was enthralled. This answered most of the questions I've been pondering most of my life. Why are we here? What's it all about? What is God? Who are we? How does this all fit together? And I knew in partway through reading God Speaks that my lifelong really search was over, and that the real work could begin. And I'd been in a couple of spiritual work groups, and I knew that they didn't know what the work was. Because thanks to Baba, I knew that the spiritual work each of us has to do is individual. It's between us and God. And nobody can codify it and, you know, make a system out of it. It can't be, because it's so individual. So I read all of Baba's words that I could find time to read. And I left after 16 days with a bunch of books from the old Shariar Press bookstore, and my first Baba pictures, including an oil painting of Baba by Phyllis Ott that hung in front of their house. And I just saw it, and I loved it, and I bought it. Didn't have the money. And she said, oh, that's okay. And I said, can you take $25 a month till it's paid off? Sure. So I did. I knew my search was over because I knew Baba knew. He knew everything. But I still couldn't accept him as God because in my mind, I still needed to kill God. By this time, I'm 49 years old. I'd been needing to kill God since I was 6. Yeah, the impact of what my mother said to me when I was 6 was still the predominant theme in my life. And it was something I just couldn't shake. Now, here's the amazing thing. Well, there are a lot of amazing things. I'll skip ahead. And a couple years of putting the Baba on the back burner, Baba's God, putting it back there, letting it simmer away, I accepted it without any struggle. It's like Baba took care of that. And before, in all my spiritual seeking, when I came across something that I couldn't buy, I didn't accept, it was like, no. And I went searching elsewhere. This didn't happen with Baba. But now back to leaving the center. After 16 days, when I checked out on day 16, the cost on center was $7 a night for the first week. So I got what I'd put out to Jerry Ann. I wanted my week for under $50. The cost on center went up to $8 a night on the 8th night. That was so funny. And then, remember, by now I'd been unemployed for 4 years. Really tough times. I hadn't asked Baba for anything during this time because what could he do? God didn't exist. No one else could do anything. But when I got back home, I had a call on my answering machine that led to permanent employment until I retired and moved here. Baba was so clever. He even arranged for a short-term job with the city of Atlanta as a contract administrator until the job appeared at the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. This job was perfect. I started their newspapers and education program, building on my teaching experience and my community service experience. I loved most of the job. I got to develop curriculum, and I got to do all sorts of research into subjects I didn't know so I could write curriculum. I trained teachers on how to use the newspaper in the classroom to teach almost anything in grades K through 12, and teachers in training in teacher colleges. I found out that I really loved being a presenter and interacting with all the teachers. The program expanded and I became a manager and had a number of people working for me, most of whom were professional teachers and support staff. The only downside of that job was the management stuff, which I didn't like at all. The best thing about that job, aside from having decent pay, which I'd never had, paying into Social Security, which I'd never had, it had a 401k program and a pension. And that was how the job itself enabled me to get closer and closer to Baba. I joined the Atlanta Baba group, thriving at the time, shortly after my first trip to the center. And on the job, it's a wonderful job that I really loved. I got to travel all over the state of Georgia, visiting teachers and doing workshops. And I got paid for doing that. And driving, I'd drive for hours listening to Baba music and drive back hours listening to Baba music. And I got comp time because I'd go into work at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and work till maybe 5. I was doing curriculum, public relations, all the promotions in my workshop, developing the curriculum and all that. And then at night and weekends, I'd do my workshops because that's the only time that the teachers were available. So I got enough comp time to enable me to come to the center almost every month, it seems, for the 16 years I was there. And I got 4 trips to India for a month each, using my comp time, plus I had some vacation time. But it was really great, and I got to go to NIE conventions all over the country and represent our paper, and I was a presenter at most of the conventions, so that was fun. So, I got to come to the center a lot, and I was able to go to India. And in my 16 years with Bob in Atlanta, I knew I was growing spiritually. And I was delighted with that until I moved to Myrtle Beach when I retired. And then it feels as if my growth has been, instead of linear, exponential. I can't say how wonderful my experience has been being in Myrtle Beach. And it's all Baba. He's my life and my all. That's my story.
Think what it is.
Okay.
Maybe someone else has one first.
David?
Was it 1985 when you first came to the center?
1984.
1984.
I moved to Atlanta in 82, came to the center in 84, June of 84. I have a little rock from the center that I wrote 1984 on.
Yeah, now I remember the question, semi-question, semi-comment. I'm very interested in Eureka, the history of it, and as I'm sure you're aware of, and the founder of it, before he established Eureka, was in the desert in Chile in about 1971 or 70, and he had a vision of Meher Baba, where Meher Baba...
This was in 69.
69, okay, well, I knew you'd know more accurate than I did.
Yeah.
But actually, he had a vision in
Right.
the Kama Desert, which those of you not aware of, is the driest desert in the world. And he was walking around getting ready to start a new spiritual movement. And Meher Baba appeared to him,
Right.
and actually he said came into his body and told him, indeed, that he wished him to go ahead with this project and to establish Eureka. So in a sense, Meher Baba founded Eureka work. In fact, Oscar always used to say that it was started by Meher Baba. So those of you who are not familiar, it's an amazing connection. Do you want to share anything about that further? Because you probably know more about that than I do.
Well, I just know what I've read in Father
Ed Flanagan.
Ed Flanagan's article, because Ron didn't talk about it.
And you never met Oscar?
I didn't meet Oscar, but I know that Ron studied with him in the early days. Perhaps the name Eureka came from this desert
That's right. Yeah.
in South America. It's the driest place in the world.
Right.
That's where Baba told him to go. And he started this institute there.
Which had a worldwide influence. I mean, many, many people
Yes.
from Esalen and all over, the most hip spiritual people, wherever they happen to be, they all got involved in this movement in a global outreach.
Right. And, oh, I forgot to say about Ron. Knowing that he'd studied with Oscar, he never divulged any of his own beliefs. He gave us what was available.
But Oscar believed that Meher Baba was the avatar. He absolutely
Right.
stated that, yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
And after I came to Baba, one of my friends in Oregon told Ron that I was studying with Meher Baba, and he sent me his copy of Avatar.
Mm.
So he wasn't just an auto mechanic. David?
Can you tell anything about your first trip to India and what happened?
My
Your
first
adventures?
trip to India. Oh boy. I remember going because I'd bought a, what do they call it? A discounter ticket or a consolidator's ticket? Because other Baba lovers were doing that. And it was, I guess, a little bit cheaper than going through the airlines. And then I heard that a Baba lover had been kicked off the plane in Paris and had to with a consolidator ticket and had to buy a whole new plane ticket both back and forth. So I was really worried when I got on the plane. Oh my gosh, I've got this ticket and it may be illegal and what are they gonna do? Well, I got on the plane and there on my seat was this gorgeous rich blue and black wool scarf. And I thought, oh, somebody left their scarf. So I called the stewardess and I said, someone left this, you want to put it in the lost and found? She said, we destroy anything that's left. Would you like it? And I said, oh yeah. So I took the scarf. All the way there, I was very aware that I might get in trouble. I was very scared. We landed in Paris, and there were all these guys with machine guns in the airport, and it scared me to death. And then we flew to Cairo, and we couldn't get off the plane, but we had to get all our luggage down and put it by our feet, because anything that wasn't by somebody's feet, they were going to explode, take off the plane and explode. So I'm getting immersed in all this violence. You know, it's like, oh my God, I've never seen this. Well, I got to Mumbai at 1 o'clock in the morning, as usual. And I'm thinking, I made it. And as we're deplaning, this voice came over the loudspeaker. Anne McAvoy, there are 2 gentlemen in business suits waiting for you outside. I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to wind up in an Indian jail and I'll be lost forever.
Black hole Calcutta.
Yeah, right. So I got off and I looked for these gentlemen because I figured I can't run away. Where am I going to go? And backstory, I had a friend in Atlanta who was from India, and her husband, or no, that was another story, but she had said that she would have her friends meet me at the airport. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. So I go up to these 2 gentlemen, and they happened to be, they said, oh, Anne, we're so glad to meet you. We're from Indian Air, and we thought we'd, there was some connection between she and her husband and Indian Air. And they took me to the Indian Air kitchen where they prepared all the food for the international flights. And they showed me around the wonderful gardens, and all this is at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And then they took me to the the domestic airport, which was something else. I was going to fly to Pune. And the plane was 5 hours late because there had been a rainstorm. But I hooked up with a neonatologist from the Netherlands and a pediatrician from somewhere in South America or something. And we had a blast. We just laughed up the whole time we were in the airport. Then we flew to Pune, and I had brought with me Ann Giles' Welcome Home book. And I was going to stay in the Amir Hotel. I don't remember whether I'd made reservations ahead or how that happened. But I went to the Amir Hotel and dropped my luggage. And then I decided to walk around the town. And I was standing on a street corner looking at this map in Ann Giles' book that was all in English. And they, since she'd written the book, had changed all the street signs to Hindi or whatever Indian language that was. So I'm trying to figure out how to get to Baba's house. Which road is the one that takes me there? And this wonderful little lady came up to me in her sari and said, oh, can I help you? And I said, yes, here's where I'm trying to go, but I don't read these signs. And She told me where to go. She said, I'd invite you for tea, but we have a wedding today or something. But if you'd like to come tomorrow, I said, thank you, but I'm leaving Pune tomorrow. And I was so impressed, so nice. Everything has been so nice. So I get to Baba's house, and from what I heard, I was like the first person to go in Pumpkin House. The renters had just moved out, and the family had just reacquired Pumpkin House. Because apparently you couldn't kick renters out, and somebody had been renting it for 17 years or something like that. So I got a tour of Pumpkin House, and then I went over to Baba's house in
What year was that?
84. No, 86. I came to Baba in 84. It was 86. Went to Baba's house, probably met some people, but I was pretty jet lagged and I don't remember. When I left Baba's house, I had on the Baba button because the book said, wear a Baba button. So I wear a Baba button. And I came out onto, Mahatma Gandhi Road, MG Road, when you come out from Baba's house out through the alley. This woman comes up and gives me a big hug, Jai Baba! And it was Dolly Basanti, I think was her name. And she's an old-time Baba lover. And she said, oh, can I show you the Baba sites? I said, sure. So she showed me the school, the college where Baba went, the elementary school, or St. Vincent's where Baba went. Took me to Babajan's tomb. And then we wound up going to Bindra House. And everyone was sitting down for a meal. I have no idea what time this was. But I sat down at the table, and that table must have been full of wonderful Baba lovers. But I sat down and calmed down. Jet lag hit me. And so I excused myself. I said, I've got to get a rickshaw. I can't keep my eyes open. So I went back to the Amir, met a couple who were going to Mehrabad the next day, so I got a ride with them. And everything was so wonderful. And I got to Mehrabad and had a terrible time. Baba brought up all my feelings of insecurity. Nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm going out in the garden and eat worms. That was something my mother used to say to me when I was a little girl because I was down. And that's how I was feeling. And that's how I felt most of the time there. And then I came home. So I just remember the good times.
How about at the Samadhi? Did you feel anything special when you first went into Samadhi?
Nope.
Still worm eating stuff?
Pardon?
You still felt like eating worms even at Baba's tomb? Yeah.
No, I didn't feel that when I was at the Samadhi, but I don't have those kind of experiences generally, although the crying at Baba's bed and in Baba's room and listening to Baba music is not a foreign thing to me. I mean, I've cried copious tears for Baba, but not in the Samadhi ever, because I went 4 times, 4 different trips for a month each.
Did Mahara say anything to you?
Pardon?
Did Mahara say anything to you?
Probably said hello.
Nothing stuck with you?
Nothing special. But what's interesting, I blot out a lot of that, and I don't know why. In my mind, I didn't ever talk to any of the Mandali, other than the, hello, how are you? But I have a video that somebody gave me that shows me spending a fair amount of time talking to Mani. So, for some reason, any connections that I had with them, they're not in my
Conscious mind.
I can't recall them, except for my last trip. My last trip was a trip from hell with Erich.
Mm.
You want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay. Um, This was something totally amazing. As I said, I didn't think I talked to any of the Mandali. So as I was getting ready for my 4th trip, I thought, I had read somewhere that it was my ego that kept me away from people. And I thought, well, I'm wasting all this. I could talk to these wonderful people. I was totally in awe of the Mandali. So I thought, okay, how can I do that? How can I talk to him? And because when I would be under pressure and be frightened, this actual cloud would come between me and the people. I noticed it mostly when I was applying for jobs and I was desperate for work because I had 2 kids to support and no money. But I knew that would happen in India if I tried to come up with some question to ask a Mandali. So I thought, okay, come up with a question here at home, write it down, tape it inside your tape recorder, because you always tape things. And then you'll have a question to ask somebody when you're over there. So I did that. And never got to ask the question until the very last week of my last trip there. I didn't know it was going to be my last trip, but I was sitting in Mandali Hall, and Erich said, does anyone have any questions? And here is my hand, and he called on me. Erich had never called on me, had never acknowledged me in the 4 months I'd been there. He called on everybody else, but he never acknowledged me. This time he did. And I asked the question. I said, isn't all the emphasis on health in the United States a distraction from Baba? And Erich looked right at me and said, don't bother Baba. Internally, I went nuts. It felt like everything in my body got rearranged. It was like, and what came to my mind was my mom's saying that God would never forgive me and was sending me to hell. And I thought, but my whole life wasn't invested in him at that time. I am totally invested in Baba now. I can't bother him. He's rejecting me. What am I going to do? I mean, it was like he'd opened up a hole in the ground, and I sank all the way down into hell in it. It was terrible. And I got this crawly feeling, and I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to leave India right then, but I couldn't get up and leave because I'd make a scene, and I couldn't do that. So I sat there until other people left. And then I waited for the bus, and I went back to Mehrabad, thinking, I've got to get out of India today. I can't stand it. But Baba was kind and put me in a room with Huey McDonald's wife. Right now I'm spacing her name.
Jeannie.
Huh? Jeannie. She and I talked for hours. She brought me down off the walls and off the ceiling. And I decided I'd stay the rest of my stay, which was only a few days before I was due to fly back. And I went around and I asked people, what do you think about this? Some people said that Erich's answer was great. They didn't hear him say, don't bother Baba. Others said, well, that's all in your imagination. And someone finally said, why don't you play your tape recorder and see? Because I was taping it. So I got my tape recorder and I listened to the last part. And the minute I asked the question, the tape recorder shut off. So I'm left with nothing. Okay.
That was Baba.
It was all Baba.
Did you ever ask Erich what it meant?
Pardon?
Did you ever ask Erich what he meant by that?
I didn't then. I wouldn't have the guts to go up to him. But when I got back to the States, this kept gnawing away at me and gnawing away at me. What was this about? So I wrote Erich a letter, and I asked him. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. I never got an answer. Then, fast forward several years, I'm living here in Myrtle Beach. Devana Brown came and was talking at the center. I asked Ivana about this. She said, I remember that. Of all the things that happened in Manderley Hall, she remembered that incident. And I said, why didn't Erich answer my letter? She said, he never got it. Baba again. Now, I'll put it out to you. Any of you know what that was about? I still don't know.
It could be that he was saying that Baba is so sacred and you know, significant that you shouldn't even in the same breath concern yourself with issues of health or anything else, that Meher Baba should be sovereign to all. That's one way of interpreting what he was saying.
That's one way.
That's what I felt when you said it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah. So Devana remembered that response? Well, I'll just say, in my trips to India, especially my first trip, I got thrown for a loop mentally with different things that were going on. So I don't think, maybe it's not an unusual experience for when people get close to this tremendous source of spiritual, the fountain. I don't want to even use the word energy because that's too little a word, that things will come up and out, and you know, just offhand remarks will open up chasms within us that need to be faced. Because I had my own set of experiences, and I too felt like I needed to leave India immediately, but I didn't. But that's a whole other story. So.
Well, I did think in pondering that it was somehow Baba cutting me loose from the sanskaras of the Christian, very strict, all the stuff that I didn't think I accepted. But because my mother was so Swedish Baptist, the Calvinistic stuff in the church my parents went to, and I had the sense, after pondering for a long time, that it was loosening those sanskaras, the grasp it had on me.
The way you described it, it felt like it doesn't matter so much what he said as your reaction, which you said shook you so much and
Right.
shook
And
some of that stuff
that's
loose.
the same thing with my mother. It was my reaction to what she said.
Well, to hear that from when you're 6 is pretty...
It was
Yeah.
pretty tough. But I hope I've gotten over my tough girl approach. David?
I actually have two questions.
Yeah.
One, what, you know, just in summary, basically, what is your daily experience with Baba? And two, what do you think your greatest challenge is now with Baba?
Those are good questions.
My daily experience with Baba is talking to him and telling him how much I love him. That's singing to him, being with him. You've been to my house, it's wall-to-wall Baba. And I keep adding more, which means I have to move pictures because, oh, I've got another wonderful picture. I've got to make room for it. I feel very much with Baba most of the time. That's my day-to-day experience. Now the challenges, I'm not aware of any. I want to get closer and closer to Baba. And because I've had enough years with him, I've got history, I know that that's happening. I know that I'm closer to Baba now than I was last week. And it keeps going. I mean, I feel that. Okay.
David had the idea that in your story we ought to have pictures from your house, which are so incredible. And there's lots and lots of them everywhere.
Yeah, lots and lots everywhere.
Wow.
And in the kitchen too.
There's lots of glare. Oh my goodness. There's no place they're not.
There's no place they're not. I got that for my birthday from my daughter, and I'm still working on it. My birthday was the 15th of July. Oh, don't forget the ones on the table. They're so lovely. That one and that one. That was Jack Smalls. I just got it.
Nice.
Muhammad, you're slipping. This was made for Kitty Davy in India. It's Baba painted on a peepal leaf.
Wow.
And I've got Buddha and Jesus and Mary and Jesus over there. Oops.
Wow.
And most of them have a story.
I know they do. He's told me a few of them. Someday you should probably have it all documented. You know?
Maybe. Don't miss the Baba up there.
Yeah.
Baba. That was so neat. One day I went into Marshall's many years ago, and they had those, but all they had were A's and B's.
Wow. That's funny.
That statue of Baba was made by mud from the Ganges.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I didn't do it.
You didn't know it?
I didn't make it.
Make it. Mhm. And this is the one of him coming out of his tomb.
Yeah, I just love that. I bought that from Adele.
Uh,
It was big, but most of it didn't show much, and I cut it down. I'm sorry I did now, but that was wonderful when done by Elaine Goodman. To me, it shows Baba with so much compassion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, you want to maybe pan this. This is all my Baba treasures
Yeah.
in this case. I have incredible treasures in there. Baba's hair. I have a bead that was from Narina's necklace that Gohair used to say Baba's name, or Yazdan, on the New Life. Just gobs of little guys in there. Finish the living room and then go in the bedroom if you want. Careful of the air cooler. I don't want it to get you. Haven't aimed her. That picture beside the tree is one I took when I was there, and I swear I see Baba in it. And I didn't go there till '86. That's a Roger Stevens. I just love that.
I love him. Oh my God.
Oh, don't forget Baba in the window.
Huh?
Baba in the, oh, wait a minute. The tape has come loose. Baba in the window. So I see him outside. Baba being brought down. Jean Dudgodsky did that.
That's cool.
Baba coming down from the clouds.
Right.
Brought down by the five
Five
perfect
perfect-
masters.
Right. Cool.
That's Baba with Muhammad.
Can I do this?
This, I don't know if it'd show up. That's Baba done all in one color by my, yeah.
Hmm.
This I got from a man from South India. When he was at my house, he was speaking at the Southeast Gathering. He stayed with me and his wife. So that's from, I think, Byramangala or somewhere down there.
It's a lot of glare.
That's the first oil painting I got. My first trip to the center was outside the Ott's house.
Phyllis? Oh, you told me, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell he's got my heart?
Why do you think that? Ceiling. Over your bed.
And here's a few here, and then we have some in the bathroom. I'll move these so that they're. This is messy, but no. There's those and those. I am Lonnie. I love Lonnie.
Me too. Me too.
That Laura Hogan did.
Oh yeah? Cool. What about this one?
That's Roger Stevens. There are a number of his paintings
I love this.
around. That's St. Catherine of Siena over there. These two of Baba I got from an old-time Baba lover who died. And he was one of our mentally ill Baba lovers who wasn't allowed on the center after he'd had some episodes. Kitty Davy called him every Sunday until he died. He lived in Atlanta.
Really?
So there's a few more here. But it's really messy. There are just a few in here.
Yeah.
And that's St. Teresa of Avila. I point them out. I've been to both places. And they were two of Baba's favorite saints, as well as St. Francis and St. Augustine of Hippo. Oh, I made that.
That's cool.
I can move that. But I'm starting with the Big Bang. And I'm going up to 1952. So this room is not very light. You've been to India, right?
Yeah.
You not recognize that? That's Imanpur.
Where he walked to.
Yeah, he went in. It was the last place on the New Life tour.
Stuff.
Huh?
Susan White.
Uh-huh. I put it in here because it was fading. It's a pastel. And this is probably the darkest room. I mean, it's Baba as Krishna.
Uh-huh. There's text. Woden.
Yeah.
Love them.
I just can't resist tucking Baba in everywhere.
Yeah.
It just, her husband's name was Ruth
Rosen.
Rosen.
Yeah, my mother loved her.
She was a neat. You're a good little boy, Mo.